Welcome back to the Mind Over Matter podcast with your hosts Fatima Zaidi and
Fatima Rajabili.
Before we begin today's episode, we just wanted to take a moment to thank you for all of your support. We've received some really sweet messages via DM, and we've had people come up to us in mosque, at uni. It's just been so overwhelming, and we're truly so appreciative of all your words.
Yeah, I think we just didn't expect for the podcast to land as well as it did. So it's really nice to know that people are actually enjoying it.
Yeah.
But also we did want to apologise for the delay. We had a bit of a technical difficulty where the sound quality just wasn't great. And so we made the executive decision to just not upload that episode because we didn't want to put something out that we weren't proud of.
So today we wanted to talk about something a bit lighthearted, you could say, which is 20 things we've learned in our 20s. And the reason why we're talking about this today is because it's about to be May, and May is when we're both born.
Hashtag fun fact.
Yeah. We're literally born 3 days apart, if you didn't know, which is kind of crazy. So send your presents through on the 18th and 21st of May.
You can surprise us by following us.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, that would be a really nice birthday present. But yeah, without further ado, I'll let you start off.
So one of the first things I wanted to talk about was the ability to self-soothe instead of being codependent. I think this is a huge lesson that I've learned in recent years. I would say that in the past, if I was struggling with something, I'd be really quick to turn to a friend to talk about it. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's bad to have a sense of community or to rely on your friends. I don't think you should be hyper independent, but I think it's important to give yourself the tools to manage difficulties yourself, because if you're always depending on other people to give you answers, I just don't think that's realistic, because you're not always going to have someone to walk you through something. And so yeah, you definitely need to know how to self-soothe. So I'd say now I'm a lot better at that. If I'm struggling with something, I will kind of sit with the issue and kind of give myself time to figure it out, and then if I still need clarity, then I know I can turn to my friends. But yeah, what do you think?
I think I totally agree, but that makes me wonder, if your friends are going through something, how should you then deal with what they're going through?
How should you support them?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I mean, I don't think, as I said, you shouldn't be hyper independent. It's definitely good to check up on people and be there for your friends, but I think it's about having boundaries and realizing when you're kind of overstepping. So if you think you're unable to deal with things on your own before offloading onto someone else, that's when I think it can become unhealthy, even though I don't know if that's the right word to use, but
Yeah,
I think
totally
that's when
get
it can become a problem. As long as you're able to maintain a balance, I think that's okay.
Yeah, and I think even in general, everyday kind of things, when we go through something and we share it with someone, and then we realize, oh my god, afterwards, that I think I overshared that, and I kind of regret saying this. I think if we think about it beforehand, like we frame our mindset in this kind of way, then that can be avoided.
Yep, just give yourself some time. But also, when something happens, it seems at its worst when it's just happened, right? So I feel like if you give yourself some time to step away, think about it, and cool down before you approach someone.
Yeah. But I think what you're talking about is that healing is like a self journey that you go through, and when you depend on someone else, then you kind of, that becomes a habit. Yeah. And so every time something happens to you, you think, oh my god, I have to go to this person, and when that person is no longer there for whatever reason,
exactly, you struggle even more. And so that's something that I needed to learn. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. One thing that I learned was that realizing that no state is permanent, and that change is something that is guaranteed in life. And I think I say this to reconcile with my past, present, and future self, because oftentimes I look back to the past and I'm like, oh my god, I've changed so much. This is not how I was before. As a kid, I was a lot more extroverted, and somewhere in the middle I became a lot more introverted when I moved to a different school, for example. But then now I'm kind of going back into that, and I'd say I'm an ambivert, and not that any of that is deep, but the point is just that I'm struggling to kind of see who I am, and I'm trying to figure that out. And then that kind of goes on to thinking about how many different versions of ourselves actually exist and which version is the real me, you know?
Yeah.
But I think it's not something to worry about. It's more just that, you know, you're growing and it's natural to have those different
Yeah,
parts
it's
of yourself.
natural for your personality to change, first of all, depending on your circumstances. But also, I don't think there's a true version of who we are necessarily, because you're a different version of yourself every day, depending on who you're around. And I totally empathize with you. Like, it can sometimes make you feel like a fraud, but I don't think I don't think you're a fraud. I just think you're a human, and it's just natural for you to kind of tweak your behaviors depending on who you're around. So, yeah, but also if you're cringing at like how much you've changed, that's probably a good sign, because it just means you're growing. So,
Yeah.
that's how I would look at that.
Totally.
Another thing that I've learned is just the ability to trust your intuition and kind of knowing when things don't serve you. I understand that if you're someone with anxiety, it can sometimes be hard to decipher between intuition and anxiety, but I would say that intuition comes more as like a moment of clarity, and I think you feel more certain, whereas with anxiety, you're kind of ruminating on the unknown. And so this could apply to anything, but if you're in a situation that something just feels amiss and it doesn't feel right to you, I think ultimately you know, and so you should lean into that feeling and trust your gut, basically.
Yeah.
Because I think that will saves you a lot of times from just being in situations that you don't need to be in.
Yeah.
But in general, I think learning to trust your intuition in your 20s is definitely something that I've experienced, and I think it's an important lesson to learn.
The next thing that I was gonna say, I've actually heard this somewhere, but I can't remember where, so unfortunately I can't credit them, but it's the idea that Allah is not a genie in a bottle. This is not saying that we shouldn't make wishes to God, but it's actually kind of the opposite, because a genie is essentially someone you ask 3 wishes to, and those wishes you have to phrase in a specific way so that they understand you and they can result into something good or bad.
Yeah.
And that's not the case with God, you know. Sometimes you won't get the wish that you want in the exact way that you want, but it will end up being good for you, even if you don't realize it in the moment there and then.
Yep.
You realize it after. And I think that's something that I learned in my 20s.
Like a personal experience you had that made you realize this?
Yeah, I think I was in this workshop. It was in Ramadan actually this year, and Sheikh Shamali was holding this workshop, and he asked the question, where have you found God in your life? And it's quite a deep question, I guess, so it's not that easy to answer, but a lot of people had these really like profound life examples where they felt like, you know, they had been saved by God kind of thing, which is beautiful. I wouldn't say that personally I've experienced that yet. I've definitely seen God through others, in the sense that through their experiences I feel like, wow, like he's there, kind of thing. But the way I've found God, I think, is within coincidences, when things didn't work out my way, but in the end I ended up being satisfied with the outcome later on, and I realized, yeah, actually this trajectory was way better than the trajectory I was going to take myself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah. What about you?
So I think another thing that I really learned is valuing female friendships.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, because honestly, it's more than just friendships. Like, I view my girls as like my sisters. it's literally a sisterhood.
It is, yeah.
And I think it's so important to have that to not only fall back onto, but also like being surrounded by women who you actually take inspiration from, because you are kind of a product of your environment, right? And so if you're surrounding yourself with strong women, or women who, I don't know, let's say they have certain aspects of their personality is something you really look up to that maybe you don't have, I just think I think it's a really healthy thing to have in your life, and it's really important to prioritize those friendships in the same way that you would with romantic relationships. I feel like a lot of the time people place more emphasis on, I don't know, like marriage or romantic relationships, but I think platonic relationships are just as important, just as fulfilling, and they teach you so much.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you definitely should prioritize sisterhood.
Yeah. I totally agree with that, because I've I've grown up with two brothers,
Mm-hmm.
and they're great. But I feel like with my female friends,
Yeah.
I do feel that sisterhood kind of connection, and it's really nice. And I
Yeah.
don't think things would be the same without them.
Exactly. I just don't think it's not a feeling you can recreate, I think.
Yeah.
Like, unless you have that,
So if you don't have one,
go
get some.
make a female friend. But, like, where did you meet your closest female friends? Because for me, it was through Absoc. So
Yeah.
this is another plug.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely say school
Yeah.
for sure. School, sixth form, and I wouldn't say uni. I guess in the course later on, but Absoc was
Yep,
huge.
Absoc for sure.
Like it was huge. Yeah, some of the closest friends I have now were from Absoc.
I mean, I met you through Absoc.
Yeah. I met you too. Anyone else watching, listening? This is a shout out to you. But yeah, no, Absoc was great. Absoc is still great. Mosque as well.
Yeah, and I think it's just because you have those shared values, and so if you're meeting people in those spaces, I think it's really different to, like, I don't know, just developing a friendship with a course mate, because I think
Totally.
when they're not Muslim, I'm not saying you can't be friends with people who aren't Muslim, but sometimes it's harder to maintain those friendships because your life just doesn't align in certain aspects.
Yeah.
But, like, with you or with
Yeah.
any of the other girls that I met through Absoc, that's never something I've had to consider because I know, okay, well, we're both Muslim. So we have the same experiences in a way. And so I don't have to question myself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's nice to have that sisterhood. And also, I just feel like you can be yourself completely with your female
Totally,
friendships that you
totally.
can't in other ways with maybe other people.
Okay. The next one that I had was, if you stand for nothing, you will fall for everything. Do you get what I mean by that?
Yeah, so, well, are you referring to people who maybe aren't, like, politically active or who aren't very
Yeah.
vocal and
Yeah, I think it's
standing
just
up
the
for
idea
things?
that if it's to do with politics, but also any cause in itself. If
Yeah.
you don't have an opinion of yourself,
Yep.
then you will kind of end up becoming a sheep. Like it's herd
100%.
mentality, isn't it?
Yep.
And I think the last thing someone wants to be is a yes man.
Yes.
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 So yeah, I think it's just really important to have that self-knowledge, like making sure that you're seeking knowledge externally and trying to make decisions by yourself instead of kind of forming them after hearing everyone else and then being like, oh yeah, actually
I
I'm
do
gonna go
agree.
with the majority.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, sometimes I think it's hard to form your own opinions. I don't think you're always going to have, like, a unique line of thought with everything.
Totally.
However, and I think you had a really good example with, like, TikTok. We were discussing it before.
Yeah. I think I saw in the comments one time, like, this person was getting cancelled and then someone in the comments wrote, I didn't think that, but till I saw the comments, now I agree.
Oh,
That kind of
yeah.
thing.
Oh, don't even get me started on TikTok and cancel culture. I think it's so damaging. Obviously, it's good to hold people accountable sometimes.
Yeah.
But in general, it is herd mentality and people jump on the bandwagon, which again just proves, like, you can't please everyone in this life
can't.
because you slip up once, especially if you're in the public eye, and people will hold you to that for the rest of your life. And
Yeah.
it's just funny because even people who you don't know, people who have never actually encountered you before, will change their opinion of you just like that.
And the funny thing is, it always happens. It's like a cycle on TikTok. That same person will then be like glorified a little bit after, like 5 months after they've been cancelled. They're like off of the face of the planet. They'll be like, oh, you know, they actually, I think it's time to speak up about how actually they didn't do anything that wrong and I was the only one who thought this.
Exactly.
And then everyone in the comments is like, no, actually I thought this too. Yeah, I thought
people
this
are
too.
so toxic, honestly.
And it's the same exact people. Like, make up your mind. But yeah, that was one thing that I think in politics as well, like, sometimes things are black and white. Like, if we look at Palestine, there's no neutral, you know.
100%.
You can't be neutral when it comes to that. So yeah, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for everything.
Yep, it is really important, definitely. So another thing that I've learned, I don't know, like, the best way to word this, but we were just saying, like, it's everyone's first time navigating this life, like, specifically your parents. I think give people more grace. They've handled a situation in a way that you don't think is best. it's still their first time living this life too. And I think as a kid, all the time I used to think, oh, like when I'm a parent or when I'm older, I'm gonna change this and I'm not gonna do things in this way. But it's not as easy as that. Just give them grace, allow people to make mistakes and to learn from them as well.
Yeah, no comment needed because you summed that up perfectly.
Thank you.
My next lesson kind of relates to what you said, and it's about judgment and also giving more grace to people in the idea that things aren't as black and white as they may seem. Like, let's say, and this is a really extreme example, obviously, but let's say you see a drug addict, right? You will think, oh my gosh, like this is so bad, like what but we don't think about what led them to that. Or maybe they're trying to go to rehab, trying to figure things out. So I think it's just the idea that we only see like a tiny little thing,
of course, and
we can't shape our whole perception of that person based on that one flaw that we can see.
Yeah 100%. I mean, I think we wouldn't like it if people perceived us in that way, and so we definitely should have more grace with other people too. Definitely.
And then I think ourselves as well. I think we should have more grace towards ourselves, and I think this is easier said than done, because I think we do view ourselves very critically and we want to be better and so on. But I think it's the spotlight effect, right? It's like you think that the whole world revolves around you, and it does to a certain degree, because you can't see what everyone else is thinking, but you think that they're thinking a lot about you. But in like psychological studies have shown that people do not think about us as much and nearly as much as that we think that they do. Like, we'll lose sleep over it. Oh my god, like I said this, I wonder what they thought of that. Oh, that was so embarrassing. But like, it's just a passing memory. So yeah,
definitely. Okay, so the next thing that I have written down is just the ability to challenge yourself. And I was thinking specifically in terms of like having difficult conversations even when they make you uncomfortable, because no one's a mind reader. So like, for example, I don't know, let's say your friend has wronged you and they've upset you in some way, and whatever they've done has like really triggered you, but ultimately you know that your friend is not a mind reader, and so unless you have this uncomfortable conversation with them, the situation isn't going to change basically. And so it's really important to push yourself, have uncomfortable conversations, because I think that's what fosters the best relationships. And so I think that's a really important lesson that I've learned, and still something that I'm not perfect at, but definitely something that I'm improving on. I'm getting there.
I think it's better to always say it as opposed to bottling it up, because once it all spills out, you will be talking about every single thing that upset you, and that person will have no idea that was the case.
Like quiet
resentment. And you can't blame them for that either, right? Because you never had that communication with them. So I think in that sense is quite important as well. Okay, the next thing that I learned in my 20s is the notion of I think, therefore I am. And this is more about like the importance of having a quote unquote healthy inner monologue. And I don't want to use the word healthy, because I feel like we can't always have positive thoughts, and it's just completely unrealistic to expect that from ourselves. And sometimes the negative thoughts are needed depending on what things into perspective. To put things into perspective. And it's just how we function. Like, naturally we are going to get negative thoughts. You need to know when those thoughts are becoming debilitating, essentially. And the reason why I mention this is because our thoughts convert into reality. And that's kind of what inspired the name behind this podcast, Mind Over Matter, is the idea that your reality only comes into existence through your thoughts. And so if you believe that you can't do something, then that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
100%.
And you won't be able to do it, because you've told yourself that so much that you think that it's impossible when nothing really is.
And I think as a listener, it might sound corny, but I do agree in saying that so much of navigating life is mental. And so if you can just tackle the first step in trying to, I don't know, I guess reducing self-limiting beliefs, I think you'll go so much further. Is that cringe to say? I don't know.
It's true. Yeah. Okay, the next one is more of like something that I've come across a lot recently, historically, and I don't know how I feel about this one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the idea that absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm.
And I want to hear your thoughts on this, because I do agree. I think when you get into a position of power,
Yep.
your initial motivations behind getting into that position will change when you're in that position. But is it likely that every single person who enters that, like, I feel like if I was prime minister, I'd be doing a great job.
Everyone go vote for Fatma Zaidi.
Not that I'm saying I want to, but I just think that I wouldn't become corrupted in that position. But I don't know. Maybe I would.
Maybe it's easier said than done, you know?
Yeah.
Because
it must be.
we're not in those positions. I do think it's very easy to chase power and become greedy, because obviously it has its benefits, right? I personally would never want to be in such a position of power, just because I think it's a slippery slope. It's very easy to let it get to your head. Yeah.
But I feel like when you're in that position, aren't you more worried that because I'm in this position, I need to do well? But instead, I see all these politicians just
like abusing their power.
abusing their power.
I don't know. I think that comes down to who people are individually. Like, maybe it just means you're a great person.
No, I don't. That's not what I'm saying at all.
I'm just joking.
Yeah, no, but like to everyone who doesn't know me, that's not what I'm saying at all. My point is just that it confuses me. Is what I'm trying to say. Is like, how are you in that position and not worried about the consequences of abusing your power? You know?
Again, that's just something I can't fathom, because I've never been in a situation where I've had that much power, nor would I want to be in one, because as I said, very slippery slope.
True.
And I also don't think that I'm the best like model person who people should be looking up to. And so I don't know, just the
but then
concept
again, no one is, right?
No one is, but then that's why the concept of us all like following one person feels a bit icky. No one's like this model example. I mean, apart from like the Prophet and you know, Islamic like personalities.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
I guess that's why we wait.
I guess that's why we wait, and that's why God has left us the Quran and the Alphabet.
Yeah. And also why we're waiting for Imam Mahdi specifically, because we know that's one person who will, you know, able to lead without corruption, and in fact he'll literally get rid of corruption. So there is hope at the end of the tunnel. There
is hope. Okay, so the next point that we wanted to talk about was the fact that there's wisdom behind everything. And I think as humans we have a tendency to question when something negative happens. We want to search for the why, but my point is just you have to be able to trust in God's plan for you. Again, much easier said than done sometimes, but this is a huge lesson that I've learned, where sometimes something that looks unfavorable is actually favorable for you. And yeah, there's wisdom behind it.
Yeah, but we're not saying don't act. Like, still do what you have to do, but instead of questioning the why, unless you need to question it in terms of how you can get better from that situation, just don't dwell upon or regret why something happened.
Yeah, exactly. My point is just don't be debilitated by searching for the why, because sometimes you're never going to be able to find an answer because it's just beyond your comprehension, and I think that's okay. It just means that there's greater wisdom behind it that you can't necessarily understand right now, but it's there to serve you ultimately.
True. The next thing is literally, things are not that deep, but I'm gonna phrase it a little bit better than that. And the way I like to think about this is through I don't know if you guys have come across that video on TikTok, YouTube, whatever, Instagram Reels, because that's a thing now. But yeah, there's like this video of this person that's laying down on the grass, and then the camera zooms out, and then you can see the street they're on, then you can see like the city they're in, then it zooms out to the earth, and then it zooms out onto like the different planets, the universe, and it's just crazy. And then you kind of realize that, wow, I'm literally just this one little speck on this planet, and although my problems seem big, like God is bigger, you
Yeah,
know?
it's just perspective.
It is just perspective. And yeah, the reason why I say this is not to say that, oh my God, we're like totally insignificant. Like your problems don't matter because you're just a tiny speck. You're just a little cog in the machine. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that sometimes we make our problems our whole world when they're not. And obviously this goes vice versa in the sense that Imam Ali's quote, you know, that there exists a whole universe within you,
Yeah.
and your sickness is within you and your cure is within you, but you'll only find it if you seek for it. So the answers to your problems are within yourselves as well.
Yep. But also, like, guys, don't take this in the wrong way. Like, we're not trying to say that you can just think your way out of your challenges.
Yeah,
Because I know
definitely.
sometimes you might be going through hardship, or there's certain circumstances that you can't just positively think your way out of. Like, it's stuff that,
like physical,
yeah,
as
like
opposed to
physical
mental,
things as opposed to
which
just
is
mental hurdles, right? But
this is about those tiny things that affecting you, and they're not as, like, in the grand scheme of things, they're not as
yeah, something that feels big in the moment,
big. Yeah.
that you maybe put a lot of focus on, but you know that, I don't know, tomorrow or in a couple of days you won't even be thinking about it. And so the point is just I don't know,
Just to
place less
realize where
emphasis.
it is within the timeline of your life, you know? And even if it's exceeding, because I think we all have this rough timeline, like, oh, by this age I want to graduate, by this age I want a job, by this age I want to get married, by this age I want kids, and so on and so on and so on. If it doesn't meet that timeline, it's okay. You still have like 60 years ahead of you, you know?
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's okay. There's this psychologist, his name's, well, actually, I don't know if he's a psychologist. There's this guy.
This is just regular dude.
He's definitely something. But he wrote this book called Chatter, and it focuses on your internal monologue. And within that, he talks about this method known as the zoom out method, and it kind of talks exactly about that video that I told you guys about, where you kind of just zoom out of your own body and then see that problem from an outer perspective.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, so it's mainly just thinking about things in the timeline of things and just realizing that in the grand scheme of things, inshallah, things will be okay.
Of course. Yeah. I think that's a really good point. So then the next point that I wanted to discuss kind of links into what Fatima said, and it's just that comparison is a thief of joy. I'm still learning this, but I still want to talk about it because I do think it's really relevant. Just not to compare where you are with where other people are in their life, because ultimately everyone's on their own journey, especially in the age of social media. Like, do not look at what other people are doing and think that, oh my God, I wish I had certain things in place for myself, or I wish I was this happy. Look, I understand that as humans, it's natural for us to want those things, but like, people are only presenting a one-dimensional view of themselves online. They're not going to be posting they're not going to be posting their downfall, or they're not going to be posting when they've had like a bad day, and so you're just seeing 1% of that. So my point is, just learn not to compare yourself to other people, basically, because I think that can strip you of joy a lot.
Yeah, completely agree. The next thing we wanted to talk about, this is making our problems not sound like they're big, but you don't realize how big of an issue something is until that issue is a health issue. And the reason why we say this is because I think the worst possible thing that can happen to you, let's say you think, oh my God, like, education right now is killing me, but even that you'll like overcome. But I think, and inshallah, like, health things as well, if you're going through it, like, you'll overcome it. But yeah, like, let's say it's a terminal illness, like, even money can't, you know, save that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of things that, even though we're going through, we can be grateful for other things that we're not considering, such as our health. Because
yeah, that's such a good point. Well, what you're saying is right, though. It is really important to understand the value of your health, and I think because on a day-to-day basis you're not sick, you're not as grateful for I don't know, your body just functioning healthily.
Yeah.
You don't realize how much it's doing for you.
Yeah, it's like you don't appreciate being able to breathe till you have a blocked nose.
Exactly. And those are such like minuscule things, so never mind having like even worse things happen to your health.
Yeah, that you can't actually, physically do something about. And I think that also with that we can take account general things that we should be grateful of that we don't consider on a day-to-day kind of thing, like being able to have a roof over your head, having water that comes out of your tap within your house, like you don't have to travel for ages to find a well where you can get some water, or some people don't even have that, they just get seawater, like that's crazy.
So moving on, another thing that I've learned in my 20s is just going out of your comfort zone. I think that the best opportunities for you are beyond your comfort zone. If you are someone who stays in their bubble, although I understand that it can be really scary to go into the unknown, I just don't think that's always the best recipe for growth. Like, I think a lot of opportunities are there waiting for you, just slightly beyond your reach, and you might need to challenge yourself a little bit. And although it'll be uncomfortable, I feel like there's so much to learn from those opportunities. And so I guess just in general, like, say yes to more things.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a really cool point. I think when it comes to motivation to do something as well, like psychologically speaking, you can either be driven by fear or by like love or by desire to do that thing. So obviously not saying that you should try and be doing things that you're scared of. If you do it to overcome that fear, then you'll actually maybe end up enjoying that thing.
Yeah, I mean, all of these points, again, take with a pinch of salt. We're not saying that
go for the extreme of what we're saying.
If it's something, I don't know, let's say you have you're scared of spiders and that's like a legit phobia you have. I'm not saying go to I'm a celebrity now and start eating spiders. Okay, you don't need to go that far. I'm just saying do small things that are still a little bit within your reach to challenge yourself, because I don't know, that's just a belief that I have. I think the best things are outside of your comfort zone, and that's the only way that you'll grow, is doing things that slightly challenge you.
that triggered my fear there. My fear of spiders.
I'm sorry to do that to you.
No, it's okay. Yeah, no, I totally agree. I've just realized a lot of these points are so do this, don't do this. No, we're not trying to give advice here.
It's not trying to lecture you. It's literally just what we've learned.
It's a lecture to ourselves almost.
Pretty much,
We've said these are lessons that we've learned, but it's things that we're still learning, and we don't know if it's the right thing to have learned or not as well. So
I mean, it's the right thing for our life personally. It doesn't mean the same has to apply to you. You can take what applies and leave what doesn't. So the final point we had was just to pay attention to your state of mind the next time you're happy, because I think as humans we have this natural tendency to have negative thoughts, and it's just not realistic for you to be in a constant state of contentment. And so one, just know that if you're having negative thoughts, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're unhappy with your life. It just means that as humans we have a tendency to, I think, search for problems. And so if you know that, I think you're less likely to be affected, basically, when your state of mind changes.
Yeah. Islamically, like, speaking, the word insan comes from the root word nasiya, I believe, and that means to forget. And I think that's just to show how forgetting is a super big part of our human nature. And so even if we're going through something good, we'll often forget that moment of good because we'll be reminded of something bad that's happened. But it also works the other way around. Like, if we're going through something bad, we can remind ourselves of the good things that have happened to overcome that, feeling of, like, that state of wallowing almost.
Essentially, look, you need both good and bad because it puts things into perspective, and it's impossible to be in like one state for the rest of your life. So as long as you recognize that it's natural, I feel like it becomes easier to manage. Yeah,
it's the idea that if everything was blue, nothing would be blue. So using color as an example of happiness and sadness, like, you would not be able to recognize the good that you have without
Exactly.
the bad that you've experienced.
Exactly. It's like no rain, no flowers.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. I think that's everything.
Yeah,
that
that's everything.
as in we've learned more.
Of course,
But
yeah.
for the sake of the time, and we wanted to keep it to 20 things. So yeah, that's everything from us for today.
Yeah, we just wanted to thank you for tuning in, and again, just being very patient with us, because we know
Yeah.
that there's an extremely long time between this episode and our last upload, but inshallah we'll be able to be a little bit more consistent going forward.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Inshallah.
Please
Download this
subscribe.
episode, follow.
Yeah, download this episode. If you're listening on Spotify, if you're on YouTube, subscribe,
Yeah, like, subscribe,
comment, and yeah, you can let us know on Instagram as well. Yeah, thank you so much.